Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking how an explosive true crime story somehow morphed into a landmark ruling on the limits of constitutional law in South Africa. We're looking at a case that literally starts with drugs and fugitive escapes, but ends up defining exactly how and when you can use the Constitution to defend yourself in court. Okay, let's just jump right into this staggeringly high number. 6.38 million rand. That represents the massive tax bill slapped on a Mr. Solomon Masalala Motsepe. Now, Mr. Motsepe, well, he wasn't exactly your average businessman. By December 1995, he was a full-blown fugitive from justice. He actually escaped from custody while facing a serious criminal charge for dealing, get this, 1 million Mandrax tablets. So with him on the run, and possibly hiding out in Nigeria according to the authorities, the tax man came knocking.
And what they found was wild. Just consider the sheer scale of the luxury vehicles discovered when a chartered accountant dug into his estate. We are talking about an incredible fleet: 8 Mercedes-Benzes, 4 Toyotas, 3 Volkswagens, and a Porsche 944 Turbo. It's like a small dealership. Naturally, this set the stage for a massive legal showdown. The Commissioner for Inland Revenue obviously wanted their money, so they moved to sequester, or essentially bankrupt, the Motsepes' joint estate.
Which leads us to our core mystery for today. How on earth did a straightforward tax bust, complete with a fugitive and a fleet of luxury cars, escalate all the way to South Africa's highest court? To really understand this, we need to look at exactly how fast the government moved, and more importantly, how Mr. Motsepe's wife decided to fight back.
Section 1. The Fugitive and the Taxman. So, looking at the finances, the math reveals the brutal reality of what's called factual insolvency for the Motsepe joint estate. Despite all those flashy luxury cars, the accountant figured out that their total assets amounted to just over 4 million rand. But remember that tax bill? It was nearly 6.4 million. This left the estate with a massive, gaping financial shortfall of roughly 2.3 million rand. The math was brutally simple here. They owed way more than they actually had.
This sparked a timeline of immense pressure. The speed here is just incredible. In February 1996, the commissioner issued the tax assessments on the 14th, making them due that exact same day. Boom. By the 15th, they're officially overdue. On the 16th, the commissioner files a certified statement, which legally acts like a civil judgment. And then, by the 21st, they launch the sequestration application. In just one single week, the taxman moved to completely freeze and seize the estate.
Section 2. The Constitutional Shield. With her husband out of the picture and on the run, Mrs. Motsepe was left facing this rapid-fire bankruptcy process. She decided to use the interim constitution as a highly technical shield. See, because she couldn't really argue with the raw numbers, she targeted the law itself. She specifically went after Sections 92 and 94 of the Income Tax Act. These sections basically say it is not competent to question the correctness of an assessment during proceedings like a sequestration. In plain English, if the taxman says you owe it, the judge has to accept those numbers during the bankruptcy hearing.
This is built on a very strict classic tax principle: pay now, argue later. The Income Tax Act forces you to pay up first and then use their own internal objection processes to argue about the details later. Mrs. Motsepe argued, hey, this denies me access to a proper court of law, and it violates my constitutional rights to a fair trial, equality, and procedurally fair administrative action.
Section 3. The Rules of Referral.
Surprisingly, a local judge actually agreed she might have a point and referred the case up to the Constitutional Court. But let's look at the rules for that. The absolute key phrase in Section 1021 of the Interim Constitution is decisive for the case. A lower court couldn't just punt any interesting constitutional question up the ladder for fun. The constitutional issue had to actually matter for the final outcome of the underlying case, which, remember, was the bankruptcy of the Motsepe estate.
Section 4. The Court's Reality Check.
And this brings us to Justice Ackerman at the Constitutional Court, who basically gave everyone a massive reality check. He looked past the high-level legal theory and focused straight on the math. He pointed out a glaring, incredibly pragmatic flaw in Mrs. Motsepe's strategy. She totally failed to provide any solid evidence that the tax assessments were actually wrong or that the couple had some hidden stash of assets that would cover the debt. Think about it. Whether that specific tax law was unconstitutional or perfectly fine, the math didn't change one bit. The estate was factually, hopelessly insolvent by 2.3 million rand either way.
Therefore, striking down the tax law wasn't decisive for her case at all.
Even if she won the grand constitutional argument, she was still going to lose the sequestration case because, well, they were broke. This meant the referral from the lower court to the constitutional court was fundamentally flawed right from the starting line.
Section 5. Ignoring alternative remedies.
But the Constitutional Court didn't stop there. They also called out a massive procedural sidestep the Motsepes took that completely undermined their constitutional claim. Normally, if you think a tax bill is wrong, there's a standard path. You have 30 days to lodge a formal objection. If that fails, you appeal to a special tax court. Mrs. Motsepe entirely ignored this path. She didn't even bother asking the commissioner for a simple time extension to file a formal objection.
Justice Ackerman hit the nail on the head here. You cannot simply bypass standard, everyday legal remedies just to manufacture a fancy constitutional crisis. If a dispute can be solved using ordinary legal procedures, like, say, filing a standard tax objection, the courts must avoid escalating it into a constitutional issue.
Section 6. The final verdict.
So, the Constitutional Court rejected the referral outright, and then they went a step further. Now, usually the court is super cautious about awarding costs in constitutional cases because they don't want to scare off everyday citizens from defending their rights. But here, they penalized Mrs. Motsepe. They ordered her to pay the commissioner's legal costs for 2 counsel. Why? Because her entire constitutional challenge was viewed as little more than a bad faith tactic just to buy some time.
This ruling set a really powerful and lasting precedent. It firmly establishes that our constitutional rights cannot be weaponized like a Trojan horse. You can't use the highest law in the land merely to dodge standard legal procedures, skip the proper line, or outrun your legitimate debts, especially when you haven't even bothered trying to use the normal legal tools sitting right in front of you.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on. The Motsepe case began with a runaway fugitive and a fleet of luxury cars, sure, but it left us with a truly vital legal boundary. It really forces us to ask, where exactly is that delicate line between legitimately fighting for our fundamental rights and simply exploiting the mechanics of the Constitution to escape accountability? Thanks so much for exploring this fascinating case with me today.